The morning they took my company from me. Dana kissed me on the cheek and asked if I'd be home early enough for dinner. That was the first lie of the day. By 10:30, I was standing in the 12th floor boardroom at Harbor Point, staring at the same people who had toasted me on the company's 20th anniversary 6 months earlier. Baltimore Harbor shone through the glass behind them, gray water under a low sky, tugboats dragging slow lines across the channel. Inside, the air smelled like coffee, printer toner, and expensive cedar polish Dana insisted the office manager use on the conference table. Routine leadership review. That was what the calendar invite had said. I had built Garrison Industrial Systems in a leaking warehouse near the docks with 2 welding stations, 1 borrowed lathe, and a space heater that only worked when you kicked it. I still had the scar across my left hand from the first production run. I still remembered eating cold takeout at midnight beside crated steel parts because we couldn't afford a delay on that first Navy subcontract. Back then, Nate was just a skinny kid sweeping floors in steel-toe boots 2 sizes too big. Dana handled invoices at a folding table near the loading door, her hair tied back with a red scarf, telling me we were going to make it even when the bank account said otherwise. That history sat in the room with us. Nobody mentioned it. Martin Cole, our outside counsel, cleared his throat and slid a packet toward me without meeting my eyes. Before we begin the quarterly review, there's a governance matter the board needs to address. Governance matter. I looked at Dana first. Navy blouse, gold watch, hands folded neatly on top of a legal pad. Calm. Too calm. She didn't look at me. Nate sat 2 seats down in a charcoal suit. He wore like a costume, jaw tight, eyes fixed on the far wall. Beside them were 2 family friends who had spent years at our holidays, at our beach weekends, at my father's funeral. People who had eaten at my table and called me brother. Then Martin read the resolution. Loss of strategic confidence. Need for transitional leadership. Founder fatigue dressed up in corporate language. I didn't say a word. I just watched. One by one, they voted to remove me as CEO. Dana voted yes. Nate voted yes. Every hand that went up felt less like business and more like dirt hitting a coffin lid. When it was over, the room went silent in that careful, cowardly way people get when they've done something irreversible and want to pretend it was necessary. Dana finally looked at me then, her face arranged into something almost sympathetic. "It isn't personal, Ethan," she said softly. "It's what the company needs." I looked at her, then at Nate, then at the polished table reflecting all our faces back at us. I built that table's view, and they had chosen to erase me from it. Nobody tried to stop me when the meeting ended. That was the part one noticed first. Not the legal packet in front of me, not Dana's careful expression, not Nate pretending he had just participated in something difficult instead of something rehearsed. It was a silence after the vote, the way the room relaxed the second they realized I wasn't going to flip the table or shout or give them the scene. They had probably prepared themselves for on the drive-in. I stood, buttoned my jacket, and took the packet with me. The chair scraped softly against the floor. That sound carried farther than any speech I could have made. Outside the boardroom, the executive floor looked exactly the same as it had an hour earlier. Frosted glass, clean carpet, the reception desk with a brushed steel logo. I had approved myself. A tray with bottled water and untouched pastries from a bakery in Fells Point. Ordinary details. That was the strange part. A man can lose 20 years of his life, and the coffee still stays hot. Marissa at reception looked up when I came out. She had worked with me for 11 years. I had been at the hospital when her first son was born because her husband was stuck on I-95 and she was scared. That morning, she saw my face, then the pack in my hand, and her eyes dropped straight to her keyboard. "Mr. Garrison," she said quietly, like my name had suddenly become expensive to use. I kept walking. At the elevator bank, 2 junior VPs were waiting. Both of them had built their departments under budgets I fought to protect. Both had smiled at me last week at the quarterly dinner. Now one of them checked his phone with theatrical concentration, while the other stared at the floor indicator above the doors, as if his life depended on it. Nobody met my eyes. That told me more than the vote had. Humiliation like this doesn't happen in a single morning. It gets drafted, timed, rehearsed. People are warned. Lines are chosen. Witnesses are arranged. By the time I stepped into that boardroom, half the building already knew how the story was supposed to end. The elevator arrived with a soft chime. I rode down alone. 12 floors reflected back at me in brushed metal walls. I looked older than I had at breakfast. Not broken, just clearer. When the lobby doors opened, the security guard near the turnstiles gave me a stiff nod, uncertain whether I was still the founder or already the past. Outside, the wind off the harbor hit cold and sharp. The glass tower rose behind me, all clean lines and money, built on contracts I had chased in steel yards and shipyards and machine rooms that smelled like burnt oil. I stopped on the sidewalk and looked up once. Then I understood something simple. They hadn't just planned the vote. They had planned the exit. I didn't go home. That would have been the expected move. Sit in the driveway, stare at the steering wheel, try to figure out how to explain to my wife that I no longer had a company to run. Instead, I turned off I-95 before the exit and drove east toward Dundalk. The roads got narrower. The buildings got older. Glass turned into brick. Clean lines turned into rust and patch metal. The kind of places banks don't like and inspectors visit too often. The kind of place where things actually get built. The machine shop was still there. Same faded blue siding. Same dent in the roll-up door where a forklift clipped it 15 years ago. I parked in the gravel lot, engine ticking as it cooled, and sat there for a moment with both hands resting on the wheel. No hesitation, just recognition. I stepped out, walked up, and unlocked the door. The smell hit me first. Oil, metal, dust. It hadn't changed. It never does. Places like this don't care about board votes or titles. Steel doesn't care who signs the paperwork. I flipped the lights on. Half of them flickered before settling. The shop looked smaller than I remembered, but heavier, like it had absorbed everything that happened inside it. Against the far wall sat the old lathe, the first one we owned outright. Scratched, worn, still solid. Next to it, shelves stacked with parts from our first contract. Misaligned brackets, rejected casings, things that almost worked. I walked slowly through the space. Every step had a memory attached to it. That corner where Nate used to sleep during overnight runs because he didn't have a car yet. The workbench where Dana balanced invoices in coffee cups, telling me which suppliers we could stall for another week. The overhead beam where we hung our first finished assembly like a trophy because none of us believed we'd actually done it. Back then, there was no board, no votes, no polished table, just work. I ran my hand across the main workbench. The surface was rough, scarred from years of use. Beneath it were drawers filled with old sketches, designs that never made it, calculations written in pen, crossed out, rewritten, improved. The early versions, the ones nobody ever sees once things become successful. I pulled one of the drawers open. Blueprints, notes, contracts with coffee stains and grease marks. The foundation of everything they had just taken from me. I stood there, looking at it all, and felt something settle into place. Not anger, not shock, focus. Because the boardroom wasn't where this company was built, and it wasn't where it could be undone either. There was a reason I came here first. Not home, not a lawyer, not a bar to sit in the dark and replay the vote in my head. This place. I crouched down by the main workbench and ran my hand along the underside, fingers tracing the cold metal edge until they found the seam. Most people never notice things like that. They see a surface, not what's built into it. I pressed twice. A quiet click answered me. The panel shifted just enough to get a grip on it. I slid it back, exposing a narrow steel compartment recessed into the frame of the bench itself. No hinges, no visible lock. You had to know exactly where to press. Inside, everything was exactly where I left it. A matte black laptop, 2 encrypted backup drives, a sealed envelope with my handwriting across the front, in case of internal removal. I stared at that line for a second longer than I expected. Not surprise. Recognition. I pulled the laptop out first and set it on the bench. Dust had settled lightly across the surface, but the machine itself was untouched. I kept it isolated from the company network from the day I bought it. No emails, no cloud access, nothing that could be traced or altered from the outside. When I powered it on, the screen came to life instantly. Password prompt. I typed it from memory. Inside wasn't a desktop in the normal sense. No clutter, no folders named casually. Just a structured system. Clean, deliberate, built over years, not weeks. Contingency. That's what I had called it. Not because I expected betrayal. Because I understood people. I opened the first directory. Audio files. Dated. Cataloged. Board conversations recorded during informal strategy dinners. Late-night calls where decisions were made before votes ever happened. Voices that sounded friendly on the surface, but different when they thought no one was documenting anything. Next folder. Contracts. Original drafts. Revised versions. Side agreements. Clauses buried deep enough that only someone who wrote them would remember they existed. I opened the envelope last. Inside was a single sheet of paper and a USB key taped to it. The paper had one line. If they ever vote you out, it means they think you're already powerless. I didn't smile. I just plugged in the USB. A video file opened automatically. It was me, 5 years younger, sitting in this exact shop. Same bench, same lighting. I watched myself look directly into the camera and say, calm and certain, they won't see it coming. And when it happens, that's when you start. I let the video finish without moving. No emotion. No reaction, just confirmation. 5 years ago, I had already seen this version of them. Not exactly Dana, not exactly Nate, but the pattern, the slow shift that happens when a company grows faster than the people inside it. When loyalty starts getting replaced by entitlement. When signatures begin to matter more than work. I closed the video and leaned against the bench, the laptop still open in front of me. They thought this morning was the end of my control. That was a mistake, because control doesn't live in a title. It lives in structure. I opened the next section of the system. External holdings. A map appeared, not visual, just layers of entities, each connected to ownership percentages, voting rights, and conditional triggers. Names most people would ignore. Quiet partnerships. Expansion vehicles tied to projects we had launched years ago. Ohio, Texas, Nevada, each one looked routine when we set them up. Regional growth, tax efficiency, risk separation. That's how I explained them at the time. That's how everyone understood them. But I had written the agreements myself. And I don't write things I don't plan to use. I opened the Ohio file first. A manufacturing expansion deal tied to a logistics partner we brought in 3 years ago. Buried inside was a voting agreement. Standard on the surface, except for one clause tied to founder displacement events. Defined carefully. Legally clean. If I was ever removed without consent, control of that entity shifted. Not to the board. To a holding structure I controlled privately. I moved to Texas. Same pattern. Different language. Harder to trace. Then Nevada. That one was cleaner than the others. Almost invisible, unless you knew exactly what you were looking for. A layered partnership with split authority that only consolidated under specific conditions. Conditions that had just been met. I stepped back on the screen for a moment. They thought I had become less powerful as the company grew. Less involved. More symbolic. A founder transitioning into a figurehead. That was the story they told themselves. What I actually did was move everything that mattered away from the center. Because the center is always the first place people attack. I looked around the shop again. The old machines, the failed parts, the things that didn't work until they did. This was where I learned the only rule that ever mattered. If something is critical, you don't leave it exposed. You bury it, deep enough that only you know how to reach it. I turned back to the laptop, and for the first time since the vote, I allowed myself a single, quiet thought. They didn't remove me from the company. They just triggered it. I went back to the recordings, not because I needed more proof, because I wanted to understand how long this had really been in motion. I opened a file from 8 months ago. Private dinner. Dana had chosen the restaurant. Quiet place near the harbor, low lighting, no cameras. She always preferred environments she could control. Her voice came through clear. Calm, measured. We need to start thinking about transition, she said. Not if, when. Nate responded next. Less controlled. More eager. He's slowing things down. We're missing opportunities. I paused the audio, slowing things down. That was the narrative they built. Not that I was careful. Not that I was deliberate. Not that I understood the weight behind every contract we signed because I had once carried those parts myself. No, I was an obstacle. I let the recording continue. Another voice joined, her brother, Mark, not officially on the board, but always close enough to influence decisions. He had been circling the company for years, waiting for an opening. We position it as evolution, Mark said. Founder steps back. Clean story. Investors like that. Investors. That word didn't belong in that conversation. Not the way he used it. I open another file. 6 months ago. Same pattern. More direct. Once he thins out, Mark continued, we streamline, then we sell within 18 months. Valuations higher without him attached to legacy decisions. So, there it was. This was never about leadership. It was liquidation. And Dana knew. I didn't react. I just listened to her answer. Silence for a moment. Then, we do it clean. No mess. No hesitation. No conflict. Just agreement. I leaned back slightly, eyes still on the screen. That was their biggest mistake. Not the vote. Not the timing. Not even the betrayal itself. It was assumption. They believed I had already been reduced to a name on a wall. A founder they could phase out quietly while they repositioned the company for sale. They thought control was something visible. Titles, signatures, public authority. They never understood the structure underneath. I opened one more folder. Trigger conditions. There it was. A clause tied across multiple entities. Drafted years ago. Reviewed, revised, finalized, and then forgotten by everyone except me. Activation requirement. Forced removal of founder. Without unanimous internal consent. Not majority. Unanimous. I let that sit for a second. Dana had voted. Nate had voted. Which meant the condition had been met the moment they raised their hands. I scroll further. Control consolidation pathway. Authority transfer. Execution rights. Everything already in place. No scrambling. No emergency reaction. Just activation. I closed the laptop halfway, rested my hand on it. Then I thought about something else. Dana hadn't just planned to remove me. She had planned a future where I didn't matter at all. And that kind of thinking doesn't start 8 months ago. It starts years earlier. I open her archived messages. And that's when I saw it. Not recent. Old. Conversations with Mark going back 3 years. Careful. Strategic. Patient. Not just replacing me. Positioning me. Limiting exposure. Reducing influence step by step until final move looked natural. I stared at the screen for a long moment. Then I closed the laptop completely. Because now it wasn't just business. Now it was personal. And they had just made sure there was no version of this where I walked away quietly. I didn't reopen the laptop right away. I just stood there in the shop, listening to the low hum of the lights and the distant sound of traffic outside. The kind of quiet that forces clarity whether you want it or not. There was a version of this where I took everything back. Legally. Precisely. Clean. I had the structure. I had the trigger. I had the path to reassert control and walk back into that glass tower like nothing had happened. Dana would lose her position. Nate would fold in under pressure. Mark would disappear the moment things got complicated. It would be simple, predictable, expected. I rested both hands on the workbench and looked down at the surface, at the cuts and burn marks left by years of actual work. Then I shook my head once. No, because taking it back would mean fixing what they broke, protecting what they tried to sell, preserving something they were already willing to destroy. And I wasn't interested in saving them. I opened the laptop again. New folder. External options. There were only a few names inside. People I had crossed paths with over the years. Investors. Operators. Buyers who had approached us when we were growing fast and hungry. Most of them were forgettable. One wasn't. Owen Cross. Dallas-based private equity. Aggressive acquisitions. Known for one thing. He didn't build companies. He stripped them, restructured them, and sold what was left for more than it was worth. 5 years ago, he had made an offer for us. Hostile in tone. Clean in numbers. I turned him down without hesitation. I still remembered the call. "You're sitting on something scalable," Owen had said, "but you're too attached to it." "I built it," I told him. That's exactly the problem. I closed the memory and opened his file. Contact details were still there. Updated. Of course they were. Men like Owen don't disappear. They wait. I stared at the number for a few seconds, then picked up my phone. No hesitation. No second guessing. He answered on the second ring. Cross. Same voice. Calm. Controlled. Slight edge of amusement, like every conversation was already leaning in his favor. "It's Ethan Garrison." A pause. Not confusion. Recognition. "Well," he said, "that's a name I didn't expect to hear again. I have something you might be interested in." Another pause. Shorter this time. "I'm listening." I glanced at the laptop screen, at the structures they never understood, at the control they thought they had taken. Then I said it clearly. Controlling interest. Off-market. Immediate execution. Silence. Then a quiet shift in his tone. "You said no to me once." "I remember. And now?" I looked around the shop one more time, at the place where everything started. Then I answered. "Now I'm saying yes." He didn't ask why. He didn't need to. Men like him don't care about reasons. Only opportunities. "Send me the structure," Owen said. "If it's real, we move fast." "It's real. I'll have a team ready within the hour." I ended the call without another word. Then I closed the laptop slowly. Dana wanted control. Nate wanted power. Mark wanted a sale. What they never considered was who they might end up selling to. And now, they were about to find out. We met near Reagan National, not in a public office, not in a place with branding or reception desks or anything that looked permanent. A private legal suite on the top floor of a quiet building, the kind of place designed for deals that aren't meant to exist in daylight. It was just past midnight when I walked in. The room was already prepared. Glass table, 3 attorneys, 2 associates, documents stacked in precise order. No wasted movement, no small talk. Owen Cross stood near the window, looking out toward the runway lights cutting through the dark. Same posture I remembered. Hands relaxed. Stillness that wasn't calm. It was control. He turned when I stepped in. "No delays," he said. "None." He gave a slight nod and gestured toward the table. "Let's see it." I opened the laptop and laid out the structure. Not everything, just enough. Layered partnerships, trigger clauses, transfer pathways already activated by the vote. Clean, legal, irreversible if executed correctly. One of his attorneys leaned forward, scanning quickly, then slower. "Jesus," he muttered under his breath. Owen didn't react. He just watched me. "How many people know about this?" he asked. "One." I said. "Which one?" "Me." A pause. Then, for the first time, a faint shift in his expression. Approval. We moved fast after that. Documents were reviewed, cross-checked, verified against public filings and private agreements. Every clause I had written years ago now laid out under bright white light, no longer hidden, but still not understood by anyone except the 2 people in the room who mattered. At 1:47 a.m., the final transfer agreement was placed in front of me. I didn't rush. I read every line, not because I doubted it, because I wanted to feel it. This wasn't reclaiming control. This was handing it away. Deliberately. I signed. Ink on paper. Clean. Final. Owen signed immediately after. No hesitation. His attorney slid the documents away like they were already history. "Execution begins at 5 o'clock, one of them said. Ownership reflection updates across all linked entities before market open. For hours. That's all it would take. Owen stepped closer, lowering his voice slightly. "You're not taking a board seat," he said. "Not a question. No. No advisory role. No." He studied me for a moment. Most founders hesitate at this point. I'm not most founders. A slight smile. "No," he said quietly. "You're not." I reached into my coat and placed a second envelope on the table. Thicker. He glanced at it. "What's this?" "Insurance." He opened it. Inside were summaries. Not full files. just enough to understand what existed elsewhere. Internal fraud patterns, discriminatory messages between senior leadership, vendor billing discrepancies, all documented, time-stamped, archived, real. His eyes move faster now. Interested. If they challenge the transfer, I said calmly, if they try to unwind anything, delay anything, or question authority. I let the sentence hang. He finished it himself. This goes public. Yes. He closed the envelope slowly, then looked at me differently, not as a seller, as something else. You planned this far ahead? He asked. I didn't answer directly. I just said, I don't lose control by accident. Silence settled in the room for a moment. Then Owen nodded once. Then by morning, he said, they won't have any left. I picked up my coat. No handshake. No closing remarks. The deal was already done. As I walked out into the cold air, the city still dark and quiet, I checked the time. 2:12 a.m. By sunrise, everything they thought they had taken would belong to someone far worse than me. At 6:12 a.m., my phone buzzed. I was sitting on the hood of my car outside the machine shop, coffee cooling in my hand, the sky just starting to lighten over the industrial roofs. I hadn't gone home. There was nothing there I needed. The message came from an internal system alert I hadn't received in years. Ownership structure updated. Clean. Simple. Final. I didn't open it. I already knew what it would say. Instead, I waited. It didn't take long. By 6:37 a.m., the first call came in. Nate. I let it ring twice before answering. What did you do? He snapped. No greeting, no hesitation. His voice wasn't controlled anymore. It was sharp, thin, the kind of sound people make when something fundamental just broke, and they don't understand how. Good morning, I said. Don't do that, he said quickly. Don't play calm right now. Systems are locked. I can't access anything. Financials, approvals, nothing. IT says authority levels changed overnight. I took a slow sip of coffee. Sounds like a governance issue. Silence. Then lower. What did you do, Ethan? I didn't answer him. Instead, I asked one question. Did you read the restructuring documents you signed last year? Another pause. Longer this time. Because now he was thinking. No, he started, then corrected himself. Yes, but that's not. Those were standard. They weren't, I said, and I ended the call. By 7:05 a.m., Dana called. I answered immediately this time. Ethan, she said, controlled, but just barely. There's been some kind of error. The ownership registry is showing an external controlling stake. That's not possible. It is, I said. Stop this, she said, sharper now. Whatever you've done, reverse it. This isn't funny. Funny. I looked out at the empty lot, at the same cracked pavement I had stood on years ago, wondering if we'd survive our first contract. I'm not the one who triggered it. I said calmly. She went quiet, not confused, calculating. What are you talking about? She asked. You removed me, I said, without unanimous consent. Nothing on the line for a second. Then I heard it, the exact moment she understood. A breath, slight but there. That clause, she said slowly. Yes. Her voice dropped. You buried that? I wrote it. Another silence. Then, who has control? She asked. Straight to the point now. No denial. No performance. Just damage assessment. I respected that. His name is Owen Cross. I said. I didn't need to explain more. She knew exactly what that meant. Everyone in our space did. Her composure cracked. Not loudly, but enough. You sold it? She said, disbelief finally breaking through. You handed the company to him? You wanted me out? I replied, this isn't. She stopped, resetting. We can fix this. We'll call an emergency meeting. You can't vote this away. I said. Another pause. Then, quieter. What did you do? This time, it wasn't a question. It was realization. Because somewhere in the building, systems were failing. Access disappearing. Authority dissolving. The structure they thought they controlled rewriting itself in real time. And all of it based on documents they had already signed. I finished my coffee and set the cup down. Good luck today, Dana, I said. Then I ended the call. By the time the sun fully rose over Baltimore, their first day in control had already ended. Dana came to my house in Annapolis 9 days later. She didn't call first, didn't warn me, just showed up. I saw her car pull into the driveway just after sunset, headlights cutting across the front windows before going dark. I was in the kitchen, finishing a late dinner. Same routine, same pace, nothing rushed. She knocked once, not aggressive, not soft, controlled. I opened the door. She looked different, not broken, not yet, but stripped. The polish was gone. No careful presentation, no boardroom composure. Just a woman who had finally run out of moves. "We need to talk," she said. "We don't," I replied. She stepped forward anyway. "Ethan, please." That word again. Please. I stepped aside just enough to let her in. She walked into the house slowly, like it no longer belonged to her. Maybe it didn't. Not in the way she used to think. We stood in the living room. No sitting. No comfort. Just distance. "He's dismantling everything," she said finally. "Departments, contracts, people. He's cutting through the company like it's nothing." I said nothing. "He brought in his own team," she continued. "They don't answer to anyone. Not me, not Nate, not the board. We're irrelevant." There it was, the word she had built for me, now hers. "You did this to punish me," she said, quieter now. I looked at her. "No," I said. That stopped her. "This wasn't one night." I continued. "This wasn't a reaction. You started this years ago." Her jaw tightened. "You were going to sell it." I said. "Strip it. Walk away." She didn't deny it, because she couldn't. "We built that company together," she said, almost offensively. "No," I said calmly. "We built the beginning together. After that, you built an exit." Silence filled the room. Heavy. Final. "What happens now?" she asked. And for the first time since she walked in, there was no control left in her voice. I held her gaze for a moment. Then I answered. "You live with it." That was it. No lecture. No anger. Just truth. She stood there a second longer, like she expected something else to follow. Something softer. Something human. There wasn't anything left to give. Eventually, she turned and walked out. I didn't watch her leave. I just listened to the door close. In the weeks that followed, everything unfolded exactly the way it was supposed to. Nate was forced out first. Quietly. No announcement. Just gone. Mark tried to fight it. Legal threats, pressure, noise. It didn't matter. Owen's people didn't negotiate. They replaced. Departments collapsed. Contracts were rewritten. The company name changed within a month. Rebranded. Restructured, cleaned of anything that tied it back to what it used to be. The thing we built ceased to exist, and the people who thought they owned it were left with nothing but the memory of signing it away. I sold the Annapolis house 3 months later. No announcement, no explanation, just a quiet exit. I moved somewhere smaller, quieter, no waterfront, no glass towers, no boardrooms, just space, time, silence. I started building again. Not fast, not public, just steady, the way it was in the beginning, because that was the part they never understood. They thought the company was my legacy. It wasn't. The ability to build it, that was. And they didn't take that from me. They just proved something I had already known for years. The same people who betrayed me were willing to hand everything we built to a shark as long as they believed they were the ones holding the pen. They weren't. I was, and I used it exactly once.